G'day everyone, I'm gonna answer your most asked questions in this film. Number one question I get is what rod, what reel, what line. It's all tackle questions specific to your own situation and what you're wanting to do, which is fine, but there's a system that I use when choosing tackle that answers all those questions for me. It empowers me to make educated choices on what tackle I should be buying. Hopefully this will help you in the same way. The second main question that I get is what am I using in my films? The answer to that is if you look in the description of any one of my films down the bottom under the video, you'll see a list of the gear that I've used in that film. For example, you see me chasing tuna and you'd really like to know what gear I'm using to chase tuna. In that video's description, there'll be a list of all the gear I used to chase tuna. I'm also right now going to go through heavy tackle, medium tackle and light tackle and just show you what I'm using at the moment. The final question I get is what's in my bag. I'm going to go on a trip soon and I've got a backpack packed right here. I will show you what is inside at the end of this film. Now to my system. It's not my system. A lot of people use this system. To the system. The first thing you want to do is describe and answer for yourself what fish you want to target, in what area, and what style of fishing you want to do for them. It might be flathead off the beach, it might be small GT and queenfish in estuaries, it might be big GT in a boat out on the reef, could be marlin, could be anything. Identify the fish that you want to chase and have an idea about the size of that fish. Small GT in an estuary might just be a few kilos, but the huge GT out on the reef might be up to 50 kilos. The size of the fish is very important. The next step is determining what lures you'll be using. If it was flathead between 50 and 70 centimeters, you might want to use soft plastics off the beach. You might want to use divers. You might want to use little vibes. There's a few options. For now, we're just going to say you want to use soft plastics. Get specific with it. Soft plastics, 3" to 5" range, and jig heads that weigh 1/6 and 1/2 an ounce. I think that's roughly 4 to 15 grams. With the plastic as well, might be a little bit heavier. Let's just say lures ranging between 5 and 20 grams. Next, leader. I might say like 20-pound leader. For any of these points, if you didn't really know how to target flathead off the beach, you need to do some research. The internet is an amazing tool. Type in questions and it will give you answers. You can work out what pound leader you need for flathead of that size with a few quick searches on the internet. And you can also look at videos like mine where I've caught fish that size and I list the gear that I use. You can see what pound leader I was using. So just do a bit of research if you ever get lost in any of these. Of course, you might not be going for flathead at all. You might be going for wahoo out of a boat or something like completely different. So make sure you do your research. Next thing, what line do you want to be using for this? The funnest thing about fishing is when your drag starts screaming. So for me, 8-pound to 10-pound line is pretty good. Again, if you didn't know that, do your research, find out what people would use. And now, because you've answered all of these questions, you have very easy choices when it comes to rod and reel. You know you need a rod that can cast 5 to 20 grams. You know you need a rod that can cast a 20-pound leader through its guides, so the guides have to be big enough for a 20-pound leader, and you know that you want to be running 8 to 10-pound line as your main line. You also know that you're going to be casting off the beach for flathead with a pretty light lure, and you want to be able to flick it out there, so you want a little bit more length on your rod than if it was like in a river system or something like that. Mid 7-foot range to 8-foot range, amazing. You've got way less options now than you would have if you didn't answer any of these questions. Your budget is this thing that floats over the top of all of it. If you don't have very much money, GT is probably not even an option. There's certain fish like, I can't target a 1,000-pound marlin because I need a boat. I don't have that. That's out of my price range. I can't target a 1,000-pound marlin by myself. I could get a charter and go do it for a day, but if I wanted to regularly do that kind of fishing, I can't. I don't have the coin to buy that boat. Once you've narrowed down to the types of rods and reels that you will be looking at, you then have to apply your budget to that and go, ooh, okay, those $1,500 reels are out. I'm gonna have to look at like a $600 or $700 reel for this. Oh, okay, those $2,500 rods are out. I need something under $1,000 for that. Use your budget to even narrow it down more, which is a good thing because you'll end up with probably like 3 options of what rod and reel you can buy. And it just makes the whole process even easier. So yeah, budget is the final thing that narrows it down, that final stage. And hopefully you have a good tackle shop nearby that once you've narrowed it down to just a few options, you go in there, you feel them all, and one of them will pop out as the setup for you, and that will make the final choice. And it doesn't have to be a specific fish. You could also say, I want to go rock fishing in this area that has these species. So it's multiple species. I need a setup that can be an all-rounder for these species. It's a bit more work, but you have to basically do that same process again with each species that's available in that area and try and work out, okay, I've only got enough money for one setup. I need something that can target all of these. It's not ideal. It's much better to have multiple setups and go, oh, there's a school of tuna coming through. I'm going to grab my tuna setup. Boom, hook up, boom, tuna. Oh, there's only tailor around today. I'm going to put down my heavier setup and I'm going to just use my light little tailor flick stick and have a ball on that. So yeah, multiple setups, much better than one setup to rule them all. But if you only got the budget for one setup, average out what species you think you'll be catching in that area and answer the questions of what lure you're going to be using for each one of them. You just have to be careful not to get a setup that's too light or too heavy, but that's all on you. You got to do your research and you got to work out the best overall average setup for what you think you'll be hooking and then put that setup together. Hopefully that helped you. Now let's get on with it and go through what gear I've been using lately. We'll start at the top and we'll work our way down. First things first, this is a 20K spool on an 18K Saltiga, but the bodies are the same in the 18 and the 20. So it's a 20K Saltiga, which also can be an 18K Saltiga. So yeah, this thing holds P8 400 meters or P10 300 meters. She'll hold P8 300 meters. So that just shows you the 20K is considerably larger. An extra 100 meters of P8 on the 20K. This is my GT setup or any of my really heavy fishing, which is basically just GT fishing. This line that I have on this one is a newer J Braid. On this next trip, I'm trying this out. I have not tried it yet. So big test on that on this next trip, and that's what I've got on this P8. I always bring a spare spool on trips. This is also P8, but this has the Saltiga EX12 braid on it. Most of my trips for the last few years I've been using this braid and I'm really stoked with it. Hookups are so few and far between when you're going for GT land-based that it doesn't happen too often, and you're probably pretty stoked to even get that hookup in the first place, regardless of what it does to you. I've had some very heartbreaking moments over the years with GT. The last one, I snapped a hook on a GT last year, and it would have been a good fish, like 25 kilo, I reckon. Good fish. Snapping the hook, as always, next year, which is this year, which is in a couple of weeks from now, I'll be going on a trip. So that's my heavy reel. That's what I've been using. You would have seen it in many of my films. The next step down is the 14K Saltiga, and it holds P6 300 meters. I currently have just put the same J Braid Expedition P6. So I've got my big dog, which I almost use exclusively, but I've got this as another backup, but also as a pre-rigged, ready to go P6 stick baiting setup. This is the extent of my heavy setups. It's just these two reels and backup spool. On the 20K and the 18K, I'm usually running 220 pound leader. On the 14K with P6, I'm usually running 180 to 220 pound leader as well. Now I'll show you what rods I use with these. These are the 4 rods that I use for these 2 reels. First off, we have the Spartan S79 8/10. So it's a 7'9" P10 rod, and it throws 120 to 230 gram lures. I've used this thing for many, many years. I caught that massive shark on it back in the day. I've caught some good GT on it. I like this rod. It is very powerful, but also forgiving. It's not a rod that's gonna kill me, but it still has more power than I can make the most of, if that makes sense. I'm only 75 kilo and 70 kilo most of my life, so most of the battles I've had, I wasn't maxing this rod out, but it never tried to kill me. So this rod, I haven't been using as much lately. I used it a lot in the past. I find that I can't really make the most of a P10 stick because of my weight. So I favour the PE8 sticks. It's still an amazing rod. I still use it as a backup stick, and it's got me some sick fish over the years. So that's that one. This next rod here is the main rod I've been using lately. It's the Spartan S806/8, which is an 8-foot PE8 rod. It casts 100 to 200 grams. I prefer this at the moment over the P10 stick just because I get that bit more casting distance with the 8-foot, and it's a bit softer. I just find it in general nicer to spin with than the slightly beefier P10 stick. Both similar sticks, but I've been favouring that one lately. Which brings us to this. I haven't used it yet, the boys just sent it to me. It's the Spartan S856/8, which is an 8'5" PE8 stick, and it casts 70 to 180 grams. This new one's going to be the rod that I use on the next trip with my 20k and 18k for GT. I've got a good feeling about it with a bit of extra length, but I'll have to give it a go and see what it's all about. So they're my two PE8 sticks and my PE10 stick. And I have also this P6 stick, which is a Spartan S7 for 4 to 6. So it's a 7'4" P6 stick, and it casts 50 to 100 grams. This is the rod that my son Canon used when he got that GT a couple films ago, land-based, and it was a very, very wild fight. I had to edit out a few bad words that I yelled at him in his ear while he was fighting it. He was kind of in stalemate with it for a little bit there. He ended up getting it, and I was very impressed that he got it on this setup at that spot with all the oyster rocks everywhere. The leader was a little bit touched up, but he managed to land it. So yeah, cool trip, cool fish, and this is the rod that he got that GT on. This is not necessarily what I'm going to pair the 14k with on my next trip. I'm thinking I'll probably have the 14k ready on a PE8 stick, just so there's that little bit of extra grunt if we do hook up something massive on it. But this is another stick that I do use with the 14k from time to time. All right, so that's covered the heavy gear. I'm gonna put that away and we'll move on to medium tackle. So to kick things off with the medium setups, I've got a Certate 10,000. It holds P4 400 meters or P5 300 meters. P4 gets a lot less use these days than it did when I was younger. I basically only had a P4 setup when I first started out, and now as time goes on I'm finding I'm using P4 less and less and less because I have so many more options. I tend to go either super heavy or super light, and the in-between is more in the P2 to P3 range, not the P4 to 5. P4 to 5 is just that range that I don't use that much. I don't use P6 that much either. I'm kind of either super heavy or P3 and below sort of thing. Heaviest medium's my P4. Doesn't get that much use, but it's still there when I need it. And there is times where I will use the P4. This is a brand new reel. I haven't used it yet. I've just spooled it up with that same Braid Expo. Saltiga 6000 size, holds 300 meters of P3. I'm yet to use it. Very excited to use it. It's coming with me on the next trip. See if you can spot it in future films. This Saltus 5000 MQ, which holds 300 meters of P 2.5. But this thing's an old battle axe for me. She's caught me a few and had some very hard fights that were kind of beyond her means, but she handled them with grace. Got me that long tail last year, which was a wild fight on this thing. I had P 2.5 line on at the time, and yeah, that was a good fight. That was an intense tuna fight. Probably my best land-based tuna fight I've ever had. Yeah, it was very calculated. I was in the zone, everything was working, and this reel somehow landed me that fish. I was pretty stoked with that one. Last but not least, I have this mini Saltiga 4000. Holds 300 meters of P2. Sick little reel. I hooked a long tail on it, bent the hook. Even though it's such a small reel, he was handling the fight well. I think I needed heavier hooks on that one. So I've had a few bad experiences with longtail this year. Hoping for redemption before the end of the year, but sometimes that's just how it goes, mate. I'll grab the rods that I usually use with these reels and show you what's up with them. Just before I talk about the rods, on these reels with everything from P4 to P3 to P2.5, and this is actually P2.5 as well, I'm using 80 pound leader, 60 pound leader, 60 pound leader, 40 pound leader. I'll even drop this one down to 20 pound leader if I'm doing something weird. But that's basically the range, is like 80 pound, 100 pound max, dropping down to 30, 40 pound leader. All right, so I'll run you through the rods. This is the first rod, the Saltus Hyper S902 2 to 4. Cast 20 to 90 grams, so you can cast a pretty light lure this thing. I use this for land-based tuna if I need to cast very far. It's awesome at throwing light lures, and I actually really like the squiggly grip. I know some people aren't fond of it, but it's not coming out of your hand anytime soon. I like it, and it's something unique to those rods, so I think it's kind of cool. Good land-based stick. The next rod I have here is the Saltus Hyper S80 2 to 4, which is the meter over Saltus Hyper. There was 2 Saltiga meter overs before this. One was the ancient Saltiga meter over stick, which was a very, very nice stick. It was one of my first rods when I was going for tuna and land-based pelagics, and man, that thing, it could do everything. It could do it all. It's such a good all-round stick. Had so many good fights on it. Cavi even has some really good fights on it too. The length isn't exactly the same as the 2 predecessors. They were an 8'3", I think, and then an 8'2", and this is an 8 foot flat. But they're all in the same vein. They're all around that 8 foot mark, and the cast weight's the same, 20 to 70 gram. They're kind of the light rod that can handle big fish. That's the vibe that you get from that rod. We're coming to my favorite rod, and I don't know how to explain why this is my favorite rod. This is my favorite rod out of all rods I have. Supercaster 762 MHFS. It's not because this rod is like the most expensive, craziest materials or anything like that. The reason is it's like in the perfect fun range for rods. Its cast range is only 10 to 30 grams, but I definitely cast heavier with it. I don't recommend you do that. You have a really, really fun time with it when you hook something on that rod. I like that rod. A couple of teeth marks in it as well, which means Briggsy actually caught a fish on it because I had to hold it in my mouth at some point. So that's always a good sign on my rods. If you see teeth marks in the handle, you know I've caught a fish. That's it for medium setups. All right, let's move on. Light tackle next. We are down to light tackle. For me, light tackle's evolved a lot over the years. I used to consider like a P3 setup light tackle, and now I am heavily considering getting a 4 pound whiting setup. So I've definitely expanded my horizon down into the miniature realms of light tackle. But these are my main 2 reels that I use for light tackle right now. First up, I've got this 3000 size sole. This little bad boy holds 300 meters of P 1.5. I've got exactly that. I've got 300 meters of P 1.5, which is actually 10 pound. So the Braid Grand breaks at 10 pound, even though it's P 1.5. So that's a little divergence, is that right? Deviation from the PE number directly correlating with the pound. So there's an example there where you have a thicker line than the pound that you would assume is associated with it. So PE 1.5, you might think, oh, that's got to be 15 pound, but no, it doesn't have anything to do with it. It's just, that's the thickness of it, and the breaking strain is 10 pound. So 10 pound line on this, PE 1.5. I'll use this for everything from throwing plastics on the beach for flatty or brim, to throwing metals for tailor, to throwing walk the dog little tweakies for whiting or other sporty things that want to hit top water, to flicking this with like 30 pound leader on the reef flats up north for like big trout and stuff like that. Like I'll try and catch something psycho on this. I'll throw lures at small mackerel up north with this, queenies, all sorts of stuff. So love this reel. It's got 300 meters of 10 pound line, which If you get your drag set pretty good, you can land a pretty decent sized fish with this thing. I've had only good experiences with the soles, which can go with a multitude of different rods. I'll show you a few of my rods in a sec, but basically these two reels are interchangeable with each other on whatever rod I'm choosing to use them with at any given time. With all these setups, I'll like get an idea in my head using that reverse fish technique, and I'll customize the specifics of which reel goes on which rod with which leader and which line, and re-spool things and tie different size leaders depending on what rod I've got them on and what fish I'm after. So yeah, I do a lot of mixing and matching with my setups, which you'll notice if you look at my description in my videos. You might see, oh, that's that reel he was using in that other setup, but it's on a different rod, completely different leader. This guy's mental. But no, I just like getting ideas in my head about how I want to target a species using different lure techniques and stuff like that, and I'll definitely mix and match as I go. Next is the slightly smaller little brother of the 3000. This is a 2500. This little one holds 300 meters of PE 1.2, which happens to be 8 pound in the Braid Grand, which I have on this. So again, another deviation from what you'd expect the PE and the pound to be, but that's what it is in Braid. Yeah, little Nady, he caught a large queenfish on this, on a walk the dog way up north. Sick fight, stoked for him. Just goes to show that something you could be targeting tiny little whiting on. If you use it in the right way with the right leader and you get lucky, you can land a massive fish on it as well. I'll bring out a couple of rods now and I'll show you what I put these on. First up of the light tackle rods, we've got this TD0742 MXS. It casts 6 to 28 grams. I like this rod for flatties, for casting like a bigger diver. Not many people use divers for flatties. I think most people try and use like big swim baits and stuff like that. The only ones I've ever hooked were on divers. And I don't know if I'm a kook or what's going on, but I've thrown swim baits and none of them wanted to eat it, but they love my little diver technique. So I'm kind of locked on using divers for flatty, and this one can cast that, 20 gram diver pretty nicely. I like a bit of versatility. I'm not the most patient fisherman in the whole entire universe, but if I know there's something out there, I will cast all day for it. It's just when you're making YouTube films as well, you're kind of like, okay, it's been 4 hours of casting, we haven't had a hit. I'm going to put on a little walk the dog or something and try and catch a whiting. Just so I have something for the film, but also because I'm kind of bored of constantly casting and not hooking anything. It's similar to the Supercaster, that favorite rod of mine. The cast weight's very similar, but the guides are a bit smaller on this, so it doesn't lean itself to throw in like 40 to 60 pound leader even on a rod that shouldn't be able to do that. This one kind of keeps things restricted to that 20 pound leader. I don't know if I'd go much, maybe I've thrown 30 pound leader with it, but not much more than that. That's my heavier of the lights. Next up we have the little brother of that, TD0742 LXS, and it casts 3.5 to 14 grams. So basically half the cast weight. Great for walking the dog. I don't mind the stick one bit. It is a very nice stick. Good length too for off the beach. You can have a decent cast on a metal or a little soft plastic, flicking it out in the gutter. Nice little Rodney. I've had some fun on that. Next up we have the Rebellion 741 ML Plus FS. And it casts a very specific 2.7 to 14 grams. Psychologically a perfect stick because the blank is still in one piece, you know what I mean? If I could, all my rods would be one piece. I'd have this massive 9 foot long rod tube that I'd take on airplanes, but that's not reality. So you have to have 2 piece. Final rod, I've just got my hands on it. Don't think this is released yet, but it will be very shortly. It's the Captain Risky 641 ULFS. It casts 0.5 to 6 grams. I specifically got it for wading and doing walk the dog because it's that little bit shorter. I found wading with longer sticks that I use for like the beach gutters and stuff like that, you kind of get like tired. I know it's so light, but just having everything up a little bit more, you can't kind of point the tip down as much and everything's kind of crammed up a bit. Just that foot shorter, it was much easier to wade, and it is actually considerably lighter as well. It's like nothing. It's an actual feather, this thing. So yeah, I had a fun session on this the other day with Canon. He ended up getting that big whiting, and I'm very keen for future tweakies with this fella. Hopefully that has been helpful for you guys. Also the strategy for trying to work out what gear you need by reverse engineering from fish all the way back to rod and reel. The final question that you guys ask the most is, what do I put in my backpack? Keep in mind that I'm a fishing YouTuber. I'm not a normal fisherman. I am trying to make films when I go fishing. So if something's not working, I need options. I need to be able to let go of that whole idea and try something completely new to try and get a film, because in a perfect world, you'd just go on a GT trip and go and catch a GT. But it doesn't always work like that. You might go there and they're coming up and looking at your lures, not hitting, or maybe they're hitting and missing because you're using singles and you're an idiot like me last time. Whatever it is, your idea that you have for the trip might not work out. So you have to be adaptable and be able to change to get a film from that trip. It can cost thousands of dollars in flights and fuel and accommodation and all these things to get up to the zones. So you have to be able to adapt and change and use different fishing techniques and target different species, because that's your job. And you're a YouTuber. You're not just there to catch the GT, you're there to make a film so that there's something to upload so you can feed the family and put some food on the table and pay rent and all the rest of it. So I'm not recommending you put any of this in your bag, but it's what I put in my bag. This backpack is a prototype Cavi backpack that is never gonna actually be made. Cavi got them prototyped and they were pretty spinal tappy. The back piece just wasn't that comfortable. And the shape of it was quite wide. Something about it just didn't really have good back support, and he never ended up making these. But for me, because I'm a YouTube fisherman, I don't just have fishing gear in here, I also have camera gear. And because I'm a land-based fisherman, a lot of the time I'm carrying water, even more water than I have in this at the moment, and even more food than I have in this at the moment. So in here, measure map. When you're up north, there's many different tropical little fish that are super tasty, but they all have different size limits. Very handy to be able to have a quick measure on something and work out, is it legal? Can I keep this for lunch? It's not really for the fun comps that I do with the kids and stuff like that. This one, when I'm up north and I'm on a proper like GT mission or one of my proper island trips, this is more just to see if I can eat the fish if it's big enough. Massive D hookers. These things are so long just in case you actually hook a shark and it swallows the lure or something and you gotta kind of get in the zone. They're not the longest ever, but they're pretty bloody long. These are Samaki. I think they cost like 25 or 50 bucks or something. They're pretty good. They've rusted, but they haven't seized up too badly. I've had them for years, so they're a good one. Next is a set of gloves. If they're not already on my hands, they will be in my bag. Shout out to Cav for giving me this pair of Cavi gloves. Before we get into the backpack itself, I've usually got my fighting belt chilling on the outside. If it's not on my waist, it'll be on the backpack. What do we got? Muesli bars. Water bottle. Second dry bag with my GoPro batteries inside and memory cards. I use the second dry bag just in case I open this and a big wave splashes or something like that. The secondary layer of protection, just because there's so many batteries, very bad to get them all wet. All right, next is leader. This might seem overkill, but this is literally what I take. I actually usually bring 4 to 5 setups with me when I go for a hike. Having the means to quickly switch between styles of fishing is super important as a YouTuber. If one thing's not working, you need to be able to drop it, go to something else, and make the most of your time on that island or that place. You're basically just pivoting to make sure you get a good film. I'm sure it makes sense. We've got 10 pound, 16 pound, 20 pound, ran out of 30, 40 pound, 60 pound, 80 pound, 100 pound. And now in the GT territory, 180 pound. And the main leader I use for Bang Bang, 220 pound. Something cool about land-based fishing is there's a lot of unknowns. Anything can swim past that ledge you're standing on. I want to be prepared for whatever comes by. Zinc, very good natural sun cream. Head torch, just in case everything's skits in the late arvo and you need to stay late. You're walking home in the dark. You'll laugh at this, but this thing is my leader burning lighter at the moment. I don't have a normal lighter. All I've got is one of these barbecue little jimmies. Next, pair of braid scissors, crucial for tying leaders. We're down to lures here. This is a box of medium lures, 150mm floating sticks, right down to some tiny little metals. There is some sinking sticks, a bunch of swivels you can see here too. If everything was shut down, I would 100% throw those on P6 for a GT if it wasn't wanting to hit anything else. Light tackle. Many walk the dogs. I love top water these days. I think if I had a choice of any style of fishing, top water. Got my heavy. Whole bag just nearly fell off the top. There's nothing left in it, I don't think. Not sure how much of this you can see. Oh yeah, you can see a bit. Got my GT sticks. Got my HBA pliers. I actually have a little knife in here too, just in case I want to fillet something and I don't have the proper filleting knife with me at the time. I always have this little flip knife as a backup. I will have more lures than that, I just haven't got them all ready yet for the trip. And same with the other two boxes, I haven't finished getting them ready for this trip. That, my friends, is basically what I will take on a trip. Oh, I might have like my mobile phone in with the batteries switched off just in case of an emergency or something like that. But a lot of the islands we go to don't even have reception anyway, as we found out in the boat flip film. Which actually, for the fourth question, that was real. I can't believe so many people think it was fake. I kind of understand why people would think it was fake because I cooked the beginning of the edit. Like I didn't really explain that we were already camping out on the island, but still get so many comments saying this is the most fake thing I've ever seen, and there was not a single thing fake about it. So that blows my mind that it's still getting so written off. I hope that answered your guys' questions and you have a little bit more of a foundation for choosing what gear to buy. I know it can be pretty daunting at the beginning and I had no clue. I used to just buy everything and trial by error, trial by failure. Is that how it goes? It was actually trial by seizing everything up in the salt water. So it was trial by water. And I basically would use reels for a week. They would completely seize up and die. And I'd be like, oh my God, I have to buy a more expensive one, more expensive, until I ended up with a Daiwa Catalina. And the old ones, like the old kind of silvery goldy color ones, that I literally could just dunk in the ocean, swim around with it, reel it underwater, do anything with it. And it might get like slightly crunchy, but she'd keep working. I eliminated all other options up until that point and learnt the hard way financially and emotionally that you want to get good gear, you want to spend a bit of coin. And over the years, I've worked out that this reverse engineering system of working out what fish you want first, what lure you want to use, what leader, what line, then what rod and reel. It's the best way to do it. I can't even imagine doing it any other way. Something that I didn't really think about before making this film was how little I use the P4 setup now that I have so many options with my gear. And that may be interesting to you guys as well, because if you're just trying to get one setup to rule them all, the P3 to 5 or the P4 setup is pretty good. It's a real middle of the range, covers many different bases kind of a setup. And as you expand your gear and get to the point where you have like a P10 setup, but also a P1 setup and everything in between, the P4, I don't reach for that one very much. It's the least reached for setup, interestingly, where it used to be the only setup. So yeah, that was an interesting insight that I learned from making this. I hope you're all doing good. I have a bunch of trips planned for the rest of the year. Hopefully I can get a GT. Hopefully I can get a longtail. I've been dusted by the longtails this year. I've still got a few months left to try and redeem myself, and I haven't caught a proper GT in years. I'm going to try real hard over the next few months to get a bang bang. Proper bang bang off the rocks. No more hook snappage, please. And no more hook bend outage or dropped fish, pulled hooks and stuff like that. I need a little lucky streak here where stuff just sticks and doesn't break. we'll see what happens. It's always fun. So yeah, hope you guys enjoyed the film.